August 25, 1944. Dawn breaks over the Normandy countryside, casting long shadows across endless columns of American trucks stretching beyond the horizon. The rumble of 10,000 engines creates a mechanical symphony that drowns out the morning birdsong. Dust clouds billow like desert storms as convoy after convoy disappears into the French landscape, each vehicle bearing the distinctive red ball insignia on its bumper. The smell of diesel fuel mingles with the sweet scent of ripening wheat, creating an intoxicating blend of war and peace. This is the Red Ball Express in its full Gloria, logistical lifeline that would shatter every assumption the German High Command had made about American industrial capability. The German generals had studied their enemy with Prussian precision. In the war rooms of Berlin, beneath the harsh glare of electric lights, Wehrmacht strategists had calculated with mathematical certainty that American forces would collapse under the weight of their own success. General Alfred Jodl, Hitler's chief of operations, had proclaimed with unwavering confidence that the Americans possessed neither the organizational skill nor the cultural discipline to sustain rapid advances across Europe. "They are shopkeepers and farmers," he had declared to his staff officers, "not soldiers capable of managing complex military logistics." This assessment was not born of ignorance, but of experience. The German war machine had witnessed the collapse of countless armies throughout history when their supply lines stretched too thin. Napoleon's Grande Armée had withered in the vastness of Russia, not from enemy bullets, but from hunger and cold. The German Sixth Army itself had learned this bitter lesson at Stalingrad, where ammunition shortages and dwindling food supplies had transformed proud soldiers into desperate scavengers, fighting over frozen scraps. The German prediction seemed rooted in sound military doctrine. Every mile of advance required exponentially more resources. Fuel consumption increased geometrically as supply lines lengthened. Food spoilage accelerated without proper refrigeration. Ammunition expenditure grew as resistance stiffened. The mathematics of logistics were unforgiving, and history was littered with the bones of armies that had ignored these iron laws of warfare. But the Germans had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had projected their own limitations onto an adversary whose industrial capacity defied European comprehension. While German factories struggled to produce adequate supplies for their forces, American production lines operated with a rhythm and scale that bordered on the supernatural. The Ford Motor Company alone was producing more military vehicles than the entire German automotive industry. General Motors had converted its peacetime assembly lines into instruments of war, churning out tanks, aircraft engines, and artillery pieces with assembly line efficiency that Henry Ford himself would have admired. The genesis of the Red Ball Express lay in the unexpected success of Operation Cobra, the American breakout from Normandy. General Omar Bradley's forces had punched through German defensive lines with such velocity that they had outrun their own supply capabilities. By late August 1944, Patton's Third Army was racing across France faster than any army in military history, consuming fuel and ammunition at rates that would have bankrupted smaller nations. Each Sherman tank required 40 gallons of gasoline per 100 miles. Each artillery battery fired hundreds of shells daily. Each soldier consumed 3,000 calories of food, gallons of water, and pounds of equipment every 24 hours. The solution emerged from American industrial culture itself, the concept of the production line applied to military logistics. Colonel John Wood, drawing upon his experience in Detroit's automotive industry, proposed creating dedicated truck routes that would operate with the same precision and efficiency as factory assembly lines. These highways would be cleared of all other traffic, maintained by specialized crews, and operated around the clock with drivers working in carefully coordinated shifts. The Red Ball Express officially commenced operations on August 25, 1944. transforming the French countryside into the world's largest moving assembly line. The name itself derived from railroad terminology, where red ball freight trains received absolute priority over all other traffic. Every truck in the system bore distinctive red circle markings, identifying them as components in this massive logistical organism. The scale of the operation defied contemporary imagination. 6,000 trucks initially participated, though this number would eventually grow to over 10,000 vehicles. These were not merely military transports, but mobile warehouses, mobile fuel depots, mobile armories. Each convoy stretched for miles, creating rivers of olive drab metal flowing across the European landscape. The convoys moved in carefully timed intervals, spaced to prevent catastrophic traffic jams while maximizing throughput. The highways themselves became instruments of war. Engineers worked continuously to maintain road surfaces capable of supporting this unprecedented traffic volume. Bridge reinforcement teams followed close behind, strengthening structures that had never been designed for such massive loads. Fuel depots sprouted like mushrooms along the routes, each one a complex operation involving storage tanks, pumping equipment, and security DETHEHMENTS. American abundance revealed itself in every aspect of the operation. While German forces were rationing fuel to individual vehicles, Red Ball Express drivers received unlimited gasoline allocations. German soldiers were subsisting on ersatz coffee and black bread. American truck drivers consumed fresh meat, real coffee, and chocolate bars that seemed as abundant as autumn leaves. The contrast was not merely material, but philosophical. It represented two entirely different approaches to warfare and resource management. Human element of the Red Ball Express reflected America's democratic ideals in action. Roughly 75% of the drivers were African American soldiers, many of whom had been denied combat roles due to military segregation policies. These men, who had faced discrimination and prejudice in civilian life, found themselves entrusted with one of the war's most critical missions. They drove through enemy territory, often without adequate protection, knowing that their cargo might determine the outcome of battles hundreds of miles away. Private James Robinson, a truck driver from Alabama, wrote to his sister about the strange liberation he found on the highways of France. "Here on these roads, ain't nobody asking about the color of your skin. They just want to know if you can keep that truck moving and get them supplies where they need to go. We're driving day and night, and every mile we cover is a mile closer to ending this war." The psychological impact on German forces was profound and immediate. Wehrmacht soldiers, accustomed to supply shortages and mechanical failures, watched in amazement as American units advanced with seemingly unlimited resources. Captain Klaus Müller, captured near Metz in September 1944, later testified to American interrogators about the demoralization that swept through German ranks. "We had been told that American industry was soft, that their soldiers were undisciplined shopkeepers who would crumble under pressure. But then we saw their supply convoys' endless lines of trucks, all identical, all perfectly maintained, carrying more ammunition and fuel than we had seen in months. It was like watching a mechanical storm, and we knew we could not compete with such abundance." The symbolic power of abundance extended beyond mere materiel. Each Red Ball Express truck carried with it the implicit promise of American industrial might. German soldiers who had grown accustomed to patching equipment, recycling materials, and making do with inferior substitutes witnessed an enemy that simply discarded damaged goods and replaced them with new ones. American units routinely abandoned vehicles with minor mechanical problems, knowing that replacement trucks would arrive within hours. This casual disposal of valuable equipment struck German observers as almost wasteful, but it demonstrated a level of productive capacity that rendered traditional military economics obsolete. The daily tonnage figures told the story of American abundance in stark numerical terms. By September 1944, the Red Ball Express was moving over 12,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German logistics system could transport across all fronts combined. This included 6 million gallons of gasoline per day, enough to fuel a small city. Ammunition shipments averaged 3,000 tons daily, sufficient to supply prolonged artillery bombardments. That would have exhausted German ammunition reserves in hours. Food supplies revealed perhaps the starkest contrast between American abundance and German scarcity. While Wehrmacht soldiers were receiving reduced rations that barely met subsistence requirements, American forces enjoyed meals that included fresh meat, vegetables, fruits, and desserts. C rations, criticized by American soldiers as monotonous, contained more protein and calories than many German soldiers saw in a week. The psychological impact of this disparity cannot be overstated. It represented not merely a difference in supply chains, but a fundamental contrast in national capacity and commitment. The maintenance and replacement cycle of the Red Ball Express demonstrated American industrial philosophy in action. Rather than attempting to repair every damaged vehicle, the system emphasized continuous replacement. Trucks that broke down were simply pushed aside, and new ones took their places. Spare parts were so abundant that entire engines were routinely replaced rather than repaired. This approach, which would have seemed criminally wasteful to resource-constrained German forces, enabled the Red Ball Express to maintain nearly perfect operational readiness. The German response to this logistical onslaught revealed their growing desperation. Luftwaffe pilots, flying increasingly rare missions, were ordered to target truck convoys rather than more militarily significant objectives. These attacks, while occasionally successful, barely dented the overall flow of supplies. For every truck destroyed, 3 more appeared to take its place. The mathematics of attrition were working against the Germans. They were expending irreplaceable aircraft and pilots to destroy easily replaced vehicles. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of German armored tactics, privately acknowledged the futility of competing with American logistics. In a letter to his wife, intercepted by Allied intelligence, he wrote, "We are fighting not merely an army, but an entire industrial civilization. They do not count their trucks or ration their fuel as we must. They simply produce more, ship more, consume more. It is like trying to stop a river with our bare hands." The Red Ball Express routes themselves became symbols of American efficiency and determination. Highway markers bearing the distinctive Red Ball insignia stretched across hundreds of miles of French countryside, each one a monument to organizational capability. These roads, cleared of civilian traffic and maintained by Army engineers, carried more tonnage than the busiest peacetime commercial highways. Traffic controllers, using techniques borrowed from American police departments, managed flow patterns that would have challenged the most sophisticated urban transportation systems. Human stories emerging from the Red Ball Express reflected both the diversity and unity of American democratic ideals. Jewish soldiers from Brooklyn drove alongside farmers from Kansas and steel workers from Pittsburgh. Regional accents blended in truck cabs as drivers shared stories, cigarettes, and chocolate bars. The shared mission created bonds that transcended the social divisions that might have separated these men in civilian life. Technical innovations born from the Red Ball Express would influence post-war transportation systems worldwide. Convoy coordination techniques developed by Army logistics officers became the foundation for modern highway traffic management. Fuel distribution methods pioneered along the Red Ball routes influenced the design of civilian gas station networks. Even the standardization of vehicle maintenance procedures, refined under battlefield conditions, found applications in post-war commercial trucking operations. The psychological impact on German forces was profound and immediate. Wehrmacht soldiers, accustomed to supply shortages and mechanical failures, watched in amazement as American units advanced with seemingly unlimited resources. Captain Klaus Müller, captured near Metz in September 1944, later testified to American interrogators about the demoralization that swept through German ranks. "We had been told that American industry was soft, that their soldiers were undisciplined shopkeepers who would crumble under pressure. But then we saw their supply convoys' endless lines of trucks, all identical, all perfectly maintained, carrying more ammunition and fuel than we had seen in months. It was like watching a mechanical storm, and we knew we could not compete with such abundance." The symbolic power of abundance extended beyond mere materiel. Each Red Ball Express truck carried with it the implicit promise of American industrial might. German soldiers who had grown accustomed to patching equipment, recycling materials, and making do with inferior substitutes witnessed an enemy that simply discarded damaged goods and replaced them with new ones. American units routinely abandoned vehicles with minor mechanical problems, knowing that replacement trucks would arrive within hours. This casual disposal of valuable equipment struck German observers as almost wasteful, but it demonstrated a level of productive capacity that rendered traditional military economics obsolete. The daily tonnage figures told the story of American abundance in stark numerical terms. By September 1944, the Red Ball Express was moving over 12,000 tons of supplies daily, more than the entire German logistics system could transport across all fronts combined. This included 6 million gallons of gasoline per day, enough to fuel a small city. Ammunition shipments averaged 3,000 tons daily, sufficient to supply prolonged artillery bombardments that would have exhausted German ammunition reserves in hours. Food supplies revealed perhaps the starkest contrast between American abundance and German scarcity. While Wehrmacht soldiers were receiving reduced rations that barely met subsistence requirements, American forces enjoyed meals that included fresh meat, vegetables, fruits, and desserts. C rations, criticized by American soldiers as monotonous, contained more protein and calories than many German soldiers saw in a week. The psychological impact of this disparity cannot be overstated. It represented not merely a difference in supply chains, but a fundamental contrast in national capacity and commitment. The maintenance and replacement cycle of the Red Ball Express demonstrated American industrial philosophy in action. Rather than attempting to repair every damaged vehicle, the system emphasized continuous replacement. Trucks that broke down were simply pushed aside, and new ones took their places. Spare parts were so abundant that entire engines were routinely replaced rather than repaired. This approach, which would have seemed criminally wasteful to resource-constrained German forces, enabled the Red Ball Express to maintain nearly perfect operational readiness. The German response to this logistical onslaught revealed their growing desperation. Luftwaffe pilots, flying increasingly rare missions, were ordered to target truck convoys rather than more militarily significant. The psychological warfare implications of the Red Ball Express extended far beyond its military objectives. German intelligence officers, monitoring radio traffic and prisoner reports, began to grasp the full magnitude of American productive capacity. The realization that America could simultaneously support massive operations in both European and Pacific theaters while maintaining domestic abundance shattered any remaining illusions about achieving military victory through resource competition. By October 1944, as Allied forces approached German borders, the Red Ball Express had transported over 400,000 tons of supplies, enough material to equip dozens of divisions and sustain combat operations that would have exhausted European armies. The system had evolved beyond a simple supply operation into a demonstration of American industrial philosophy, the belief that abundance, properly organized and efficiently distributed, could overwhelm any opponent regardless of their tactical skill or strategic positioning. The German military establishment, raised on traditions of Spartan discipline and resource conservation, struggled to comprehend an enemy that approached warfare through the lens of abundance rather than scarcity. Wehrmacht officers, trained to view every bullet and gallon of fuel as precious resources to be carefully husbanded, found themselves facing opponents who seemed to possess unlimited ammunition and fuel. This abundance was not merely material, but psychological. It enabled American forces to fight with a confidence and aggression that came from knowing that supply shortages would never dictate tactical decisions. That symbolic red ball itself became a powerful emblem of American logistical supremacy. German soldiers learned to recognize and fear these markings, understanding that their appearance signaled renewed enemy offensives. Luftwaffe pilots reported that red ball convoys were so numerous and well defended that attacking them had become prohibitively dangerous. The simple geometric symbol had transformed from a traffic management tool into an instrument of psychological warfare. The racial integration within red ball express units, while limited and informal, provided a glimpse of America's democratic potential that would later influence post-war civil rights movements. African American soldiers, given significant responsibilities and treated as essential personnel, experienced a level of military equality that had been denied to them in many other military occupations. Their success in this critical mission helped document their capabilities and contributed to arguments for fuller integration of American armed forces, the maintenance infrastructure supporting the red ball express revealed American industrial culture in its purest form. Mobile repair shops, each equipped with enough spare parts to rebuild entire vehicles, followed the convoys like mechanical angels. These units carried inventories that exceeded the total spare parts availability of entire German divisions. A casual abundance of replacement components, engines, transmissions, tires, electrical systems demonstrated an approach to warfare that treated mechanical equipment as disposable rather than precious. Winter operations presented new challenges that the Red Ball Express met with characteristic American ingenuity. Snow removal equipment, manufactured in Detroit and shipped to France, cleared highways faster than European road crews had thought possible. Tire chains, produced in massive quantities by American rubber companies, enabled operations in weather conditions that would have halted traditional supply systems. Heated maintenance facilities, powered by portable generators, kept vehicles operational in temperatures that grounded German forces. The fuel consumption statistics of the Red Ball Express told their own story of abundance. Daily gasoline usage exceeded the total fuel production of most European nations. This consumption was not wasteful, but strategic. It enabled rapid movement that shortened the war and ultimately conserved resources by achieving decisive victories. American planners had calculated that spending fuel generously in 1944 would save both fuel and lives by ending the war more quickly. Communication systems supporting the Red Ball Express incorporated the latest American telecommunications technology, radio networks, telephone lines, and even primitive computer-like calculating machines coordinated movements with precision that amazed European observers. These systems, designed by engineers from Bell Telephone and IBM, processed information at speeds that enabled real-time adjustment of convoy schedules and routes. The medical support infrastructure for Red Ball Express personnel reflected American healthcare philosophy applied to military operations. Mobile hospitals, equipped with the latest surgical equipment and staffed by specialists from major American medical centers, followed the convoys to provide immediate care for drivers and support personnel. This level of medical support, routine in American military operations, seemed almost luxurious to German prisoners who had grown accustomed to battlefield medical care that consisted primarily of bandages and morphine. The entertainment and morale services provided to Red Ball Express personnel demonstrated American understanding of soldier welfare that extended beyond basic survival needs. USO shows featuring prominent American entertainers performed at supply depots along the routes. Mobile libraries stocked with current American magazines and books provided intellectual stimulation during rest periods. Even recreational facilities, including basketball courts and movie theaters constructed at major supply points, reflected an approach to military service that acknowledged soldiers as complete human beings rather than merely military assets. The technological innovations developed for the Red Ball Express found applications that extended far beyond military logistics. Traffic management techniques, vehicle maintenance procedures, and supply chain coordination methods developed under battlefield conditions influenced the design of post-war civilian transportation systems. The interstate highway system, conceived in the 1950s, incorporated lessons learned from coordinating massive vehicle movements across European battlefields. The cultural exchange, facilitated by the Red Ball Express, created lasting bonds between American soldiers and European civilians. French families who witnessed the endless procession of American vehicles carrying liberation supplies developed appreciation for American generosity that influenced post-war diplomatic relationships. The casual abundance displayed by American forces, from chocolate bars shared with children to cigarettes distributed to adults, created positive associations with American values that persisted long after the war ended. The psychological impact on American soldiers themselves was equally significant. Men who had grown up during the Great Depression, accustomed to scarcity and conservation, found themselves managing abundance on a scale that seemed almost magical. The transformation from Depression-era frugality to wartime abundance helped shape a generation of Americans who would drive post-war economic expansion with confidence, born from witnessing American industrial capability in action. The Red Ball Express represented more than mere logistics. It embodied a philosophical approach to problem-solving that distinguished American military culture from European traditions, where European armies emphasized discipline, hierarchy, and resource conservation. American forces demonstrated flexibility, innovation, and resource abundance. This cultural difference, manifested in the endless convoys of red-marked trucks, became a decisive factor in determining the war's outcome. As autumn gave way to winter in 1944, the Red Ball Express had transported over 500,000 tons of supplies, fueled the liberation of France, and supported advances that brought Allied forces to Germany's borders. The German prediction that American logistics would collapse under the weight of success had proven spectacularly wrong. Instead of stalling, American supply lines had accelerated, carrying not just material abundance, but the promise of democratic victory over totalitarian scarcity. The legacy of those rumbling convoys extended far beyond their immediate military mission. They had demonstrated that abundance, properly organized and efficiently distributed, could triumph over any opponent. They had shown that democratic values, applied to logistical challenges, could achieve victories that traditional military thinking had deemed impossible. Most importantly, they had proven that America's greatest weapon was not any particular technology or tactic, but rather the productive capacity of a free people united in common cause. In the end, the Red Ball Express became more than a supply operation. It became a symbol of American abundance triumphing over Axis scarcity, of democratic flexibility defeating totalitarian rigidity, of industrial might overwhelming military tradition. The red ball insignia, carried across European battlefields by thousands of trucks, bore witness to a fundamental truth, that in modern warfare, victory belonged not to the most disciplined army or the most brilliant generals, but to the nation capable of producing, transporting, and sustaining abundance in the service of freedom. The German generals had been right about one thing: logistics would indeed determine the war's outcome. They had simply failed to comprehend the scale of American abundance that would make their predictions irrelevant.